Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the Wolverine podcast here on Thursday, April 24th. Happy NFL Draft Day for those of you who partake. First round begins tonight, second and third rounds on Friday, fourth through seventh rounds on Saturday. Anthony Broom here with Chris Ballas. We will talk NFL Draft a little bit in terms of the Michigan guys, who we expect to go when, some of the guys who might fill in next year for the players whose names get called this weekend, and probably be in and out pretty quick this week. So Anthony Broom here with Chris Ballas. Clayton Safey off for the next couple days. Well-deserved time off for him. Welcome back, Chris.
Hey, thanks, buddy. Looking forward to tonight. Excited to see not only who the Lions draft, but where the Michigan guys go. That's the main thing for me. I like watching and seeing these guys that we covered live their dreams,
It's cool. And it's kind of this crazy thing now where Michigan could have as many as 4 first-round picks. And they all feasibly could go before the Lions pick at 28. So for us, might kind of get to have our cake and eat it too. Or if one of them winds up as a Lion, like Aiden Hutchinson did a few years ago, that would be pretty awesome as well. Of course, I'm also repping Cade Cunningham today. Big game tonight down at the LCA, game 3, Pistons and Knicks. It's a good time to be a sports fan in the state of Michigan. Got a good baseball team right now. Got a good football team that's going to add a couple pieces this weekend. And a basketball team that's in the playoffs. So before we get into the meat and potatoes of this edition of our show, we are brought to you today by ourselves. Using that promo code UM1 will get you 2 months of access to our site for $1. Transfer portal wrapping up for football, the spring window. Of course, guys just need to be in the portal. They don't need to have spots picked out. So that wraps up this week. Basketball portal, I believe, is closed now, but still some targets out there should Michigan choose to address that as well. And we'll have all the intel on that, of course, behind our paywall, which you can get behind using that promo code UM1 for 2 months of access for $1. Well, all right, Chris, I'm going to rattle off a couple NFL draft fun facts for you before we talk players here. I just closed my tab. That's what happens when you're not prepared here.
And my phone just went off at the same time. So what a mess today. Right. What a shit show.
We'll bring it back. We always bring it back. Clayton Safey's the glue, of course, but we'll make do without him. U of M in the NFL draft fun facts. All right, Michigan has produced 52 first-round picks in program history. That's 7th all-time, tied with the LSU Tigers. They have produced multiple first-round picks 10 times. That's going to happen tonight, and could set a program record if 4 of those guys go on Thursday night. The last time that Michigan had 3 or more first-rounders was the 2001 draft when David Terrell, Steve Hutchinson, and Jeff Backus were selected. The last time Michigan had 2 first-round picks, 2022, when Aiden Hutchinson heads to the Detroit Lions, Daxton Hill heads to Buckeye Country with the Cincinnati Bengals. Last season, of course, Michigan had a program record 13 selections in the 2024 NFL draft. Of course, coming off of a 15-0 season and a college football playoff national title. And they've had at least 5 picks in the NFL draft in 7 of the last 10 drafts since 2015. And one more stat, the one on 3 put a graphic out earlier today. Only Georgia and Alabama have had more players drafted than Michigan over the last 5 years. Georgia's had 49. Alabama's had 46. Michigan right there at 45. So, listen, it's not... This year's a little unique in that, yeah, they have a couple first-round guys, but it's typically been guys that go later. But Michigan's been putting guys in the pros as good as anyone over the last 5 years.
It just goes to show you, too, right? What do the schools have in common? They're playoff stalwarts now, right? And it's talent wins. And the good news about Michigan, right, is a lot of these guys that were drafted weren't 5-star guys. They were developed under Jim Harbaugh and his staff, and you're hoping that continues, obviously, under Sharon Moore. But they were really good at identifying talent. They were really good at developing these guys. So I think the odds are really good, right, that they're going to have at least 2 first-rounders this year, I would say, unless something surprising happens. To me, you know what? I could see 3. And 4 is, a stretch, but man, I'll tell you what, I'd take Kenneth Grant in the first round. If I were if I were a really good team, like the Kansas City Chiefs always do, they always take these Michigan guys late and they always pay off for them, it seems like. So, or they always land a Michigan guy. And to me, that would be a no-brainer for me, Kenneth Grant late in the first round. So going to be fascinating to watch. Will Johnson, Some questions about his durability, some questions about his health, AB. So your thoughts on where he goes? I can't really get a read on what's going to happen with him.
Yeah, we'll start with Will Johnson. I thought about doing it by ranking, but we'll just
Yeah.
start with Will because I think heading into tonight, I think he's the most intriguing storyline of
Hmm.
the Michigan guys that could go. I mean, you got 4 guys. You've got Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant, Will Johnson, Colston Loveland. It feels like a pretty safe bet. 2 of those guys will definitely go. 3 probably go. I still think there's a good shot that all 4 of them go, but there has been some buzz this week, and whether it's a smoke screen, whether it's what have you, there is some buzz. There's been a couple prominent mock draft guys. Daniel Jeremiah is one. I think maybe Dane Brugler was the other one. Where Will Johnson is not in their first rounds at all. And when those guys are putting out mock drafts this week, that's based on intel. That's based on feedback from teams. On one hand, I can understand that because he didn't do anything. I mean, he held a private workout on April 14th in Ann Arbor. That's the only thing he did during the draft process other than measure in. And he didn't run a 40. So these teams don't have a 40-yard dash on him, which I think that can be overblown at times. But at corner, I think that's pretty important. On the other hand, it does when you look at the teams that are picking at the back half of the first round. Let me rattle off a few of those teams for you. At the back half of the first round, let's just say let's do the scenario Will Johnson falls outside of the top 20. So sitting there waiting for him would be the Pittsburgh Steelers at 21. We know they always are those guys, and the Baltimore Ravens are always beneficiaries of teams overthinking it with, oh, a guy's hands are too small, or oh, a guy ran a 1/10 of a second too slow on his 40-yard dash. The Chargers are there at 22. They know what he's all about. Obviously, with Harbaugh and Minter there, the Green Bay Packers, Los Angeles Rams, have scooped up guys in the Lions in the last few years have scooped up guys who kind of fell. So on one hand, you're like, yeah, he didn't play for half a season, and you could see why there would be, and with this lack of testing, you could see why he would fall. There's also the flip side of there might be some maneuvering going on here. So that's where I see Will Johnson right now. Really, of the 4 guys, I can't believe I'm even saying this. He might be the one that might be the most questionable first round pick at the moment, just based on recent intel.
What does my good friend Anthony Broom say about availability?
It is an ability. It's the best
Right.
ability.
Exactly. And that's the one thing. It's like, okay, there are some question marks. Could he have played through injury like some of his teammates did? If you look at Kalel Mullings, for example, in the Ohio State game, played through a high ankle and a separated shoulder to be out there with his teammates against Ohio State. Colston Loveland would have gone had he not been in protocol, but he was playing injured most of the year. And I think a lot of people, fair or not, are wondering whether Will Johnson is, could have played and was he kind of protecting himself? And which I wouldn't blame him, right? This guy, this is his livelihood here. He's got everything on the line and a lot of money, millions of dollars potentially. So at the same time, people want to see what you do, and we don't have a ton of film on him in the last the last year. So to me, he is one of those guys that he's going to be a first round pick because I don't think, for example, I don't think that Jim Harbaugh lets him slide past him. Of course, if it's him and Kenneth Grant, somebody asked about that on the message board, and that's a pretty interesting one, right? Given that Jesse Minter likes to play zone defense, would you take Kenneth Grant at that spot, or would you take Will Johnson? If one of those two is available, I'd almost bet on them versus the field of the Los Angeles Chargers taking one of those guys. But which one would it be? So I can honestly say this: Will Johnson is one of the most pleasant kids we've ever covered. I have no doubt about his character. So whoever gets him, if he's healthy, is going to get a football player who will play his ass off for them once he gets there and once he's healthy. So I think he'll be a good pick if he does slide late into the draft, into the first round of the draft.
And then just to bring this into it, we're also talking replacements of who steps in for him on this next year's team. We talked about this the other day a little bit. That is a sneaky question mark on next year's team. Who has that number 1 corner? We think it's probably Jair Hill, but I think it's not a slam dunk. Whereas the last few years, like, oh, Will Johnson, there's your number 1 guy.
Yeah, Jair Hill is probably that guy right now, and that's a concern to some people. His maturity, he's gotten a little bit more mature over the years, but still has some maturing to do, from what we understand. And this is a guy as your number one corner, man. You need him to be dependable, right? Not just as a player, but as a teammate and everything else. So hopefully he's up to the task. It's why we've heard that they could look to the portal for another corner, and that's coming from several sources, right? That if it's a possibility, if there's one out there, then maybe they can grab one. But to me, it's yeah, that's the position on defense, AB, that you're wondering, okay, you've got the safeties and the safety depth. You've got the linebackers and the linebacker depth, and we know that the defensive line is going to be good. So the front seven is going to be outstanding. But that is the big question mark on this team. So be interesting to see how it plays out. Be interesting to see if they get somebody else. But I thought Josiah Edmond played pretty well. I think there are some pieces there of guys that can maybe develop over the summer, but that is the big question mark.
All right, let's move on to those defensive tackles, Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant. We'll start with Mason Graham. And this is a draft where it feels like the top 3 picks are set. Cam Ward's going to be a Tennessee Titan. Either Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter will be a Cleveland Brown or New York Giant. That seems like a pretty safe bet at this point, too. From there, I think that's kind of where we start to see maybe Mason Graham on the clock. And I know people knocked him for being a little undersized, even coming out of high school, sort of knocked for being a bit undersized. But, knowing what we do about him and watching him as we have, I think he's maybe the highest floor of any of these guys in the Michigan draft class. I think he's going to be a stalwart. I think he's going to be a great player. If you're worried that he's maybe 10 pounds too light, flip on the Ohio State game, flip on that Minnesota game from 2 seasons ago where he's playing with a club on his hand. He's got the wrestling background. He knows how to drop his weight and get leverage against other offensive linemen. He's if there's a slam dunk in this class, he's the guy.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And you can add 10 pounds. They're worried because he's lost a little weight since he played. And I'm thinking, okay, it's not going to be tough for a kid to put on 10, 15 pounds if he needs to. But more than anything, his strength, his quickness, he is the best. And I've said this many times, the best defensive tackle Michigan's ever had. And I've seen a lot of them in my years, right? This guy, not only is he relentless? He's got the strength. Everybody's going to talk about short arms, so on and so forth, whatever. This guy is an unbelievable football player, and he's going to be a great NFL player. He's going to be a top 10 pick. I've had people ask me, is he going to go top 5? I think Jaguars have the 5th pick. And some people are thinking, hey, maybe that's a possibility. But whoever lets him slide, in my opinion, beyond that is making a big mistake. So I've never seen anybody like him. And I knew it the first time I saw him in that spring game, AB, when he was out there against some really, really good offensive linemen and more than holding his own. And those guys were talking about him and saying, wow, this guy is something else. So love the kid, love his family. I cannot wait to see what he does in the NFL. Whoever he's on, whichever team he's on, I'm going to be a fan of them, unless of course it's the Bears.
I don't think he'll get to the Bears. The Bears picked, I think, 10th or 11th.
Right.
PFF has Mason Graham as their number 5 prospect. A lot of teams have him going to the Jacksonville Jaguars. I didn't mention Will Johnson is ranked 14th on PFF's board, though. Again, that's as of earlier this week. That hasn't been updated. We don't know if we'll see where he stands. But Kenneth Grant, PFF has him 21st on the board, and maybe more of a fringe first, second round guy. We've heard a lot of intel the last few days that these teams are more so prioritizing fit, scheme, things like that. And he's a big nose tackle. You can plug that into a lot of different defenses. But I think for me, one of the biggest disappointments of this pre-draft process is that I was waiting. The combine, you could take or leave it, but he was one of those guys, Bruce Feldman freaks list guy. We're like, I want to see this guy move around out there, as a dancing bear, so to speak. And there was an injury that was flagged to the combine. He didn't work out there. He did some stuff at Michigan's pro day. I think ran a 40 somewhere in the low 5s, which is still great for a guy of his size, but maybe not quite what we expected. But again, flip on the film, he was as dominant as Mason Graham in that Ohio State game. I think back to one of his best games, in my opinion, was that national championship game. He had Michael Penix in the torture chamber. Michael Penix left NRG Stadium that night and an iron lung, due in part to Kenneth Grant. And I'm with you. I think kind of the clock on him, probably somewhere outside the top 17 or 18. You know, the Bengals pick at 17. I know I've seen some people send him there. I've seen people send him to obviously Harbaugh and Minter with the Chargers. I would love to have him here in the Motor City, but he's a guy that if he lasts into Friday, he's going to be one of those guys where he's in the mix to be the first player off the board on Friday.
Yeah, that and one of the steals of the draft, in my opinion. Not only is he dominant, he is. This is the kid, right? Where when you say he flips a switch on Saturday, he's the nicest kid you'll ever want to meet. He's an unbelievable teammate, but he is nasty when he plays on game day, and takes no prisoners. So he could play on my team any day, and he's got the size too. That's what the size for the NFL. I know people are talking about Mason Graham. Mason Graham's going to be just fine at the whatever size he plays at. Kenneth Grant is faster than I think he ran, and I think he's shown that and proven that a couple of times in the game. There's plus, it's a cliche that there's football speed and there's track speed. This guy's football speed is stupid for his size. So I think he will go late first round to one of those teams that I was mentioning. If he gets past the Los Angeles Chargers, I think somebody will look at him as a character guy who fits perfectly in a room of champions. And to me, again, I do think we'll see his name called tonight.
Awesome. And then going back into the guys that replaced them, we sort of had the conversation the other day, but Rayshon Benny next in line. I think he probably not a candidate to make the type of leap the guys we just talked about have made, but I think probably he's a pro next year. Trey Williams, we've heard a lot of good things about the transfer from Clemson. Damon Payne, Mr. Payne, as Lou Esposito calls him. Those guys will fill out. It's not going to be as top heavy as the defensive tackle rotation was, but they're going to have the ability to rotate, and that doesn't make what they have better than Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant, but I think there'll be a little better chain reaction on everyone else because they can't rotate.
Yeah, Trey Williams is Kenneth Grant light, is how it was kind of described to me, right? That this is a guy that can be really disruptive. He can really move, and he was given the interior line some fits during spring ball. So, like him in there. Another insider described it to me as having 6 of the same guy in there that you can rotate and that are all extremely effective, and they are going to be so deep. And it reminds you of a few years ago, right? When you had 5 or 6 guys in there that you could rotate in, and there wasn't going to be a huge drop off. Now you're going to have some elite play at times from guys like Grant and Kenneth and Mason Graham. But to me, the ceiling's not quite as high, but the floor is as high as it was before, if that makes sense. These guys, they have plenty of talent there. You talk about Trey Pierce, you talk about Damon Payne, like you said, Trey Williams. I mean, these guys, they've got plenty of bodies in there. So excited about it. And especially with those defensive ends, right? There's not going to be a lot of double teaming, in my opinion, and that's going to give these guys on the edges a lot of opportunity to. Derek Moore, TJ Guy, Dom Nichols, if he's up to par like that, like they say he is, then to me this could be a really dominant defensive line.
All right, we'll move on to the 4th guy who go in the first round. Tight end Colston Loveland. Pro Football Focus has him ranked 16th on their board. A lot of people have him linked to the Indianapolis Colts at pick number 14. I did save one fun fact. It's a trivia question for you.
All right.
Chris, when was the last time Michigan had a running back, wide receiver, or tight end drafted in the first round?
Running back, wide receiver, or tight end. Schoonmaker was 2nd round. It's not going to be a tight end. It's going to be probably a wide receiver. And probably, God, man, are we talking Braylon Edwards?
I can see the gears turning. It is Braylon Edwards. Michigan does not have had an offensive skill player drafted in the first round since Braylon Edwards went number 3 overall to the Cleveland Browns in the 2005 NFL draft. It's been 2 decades. So
too long.
History on the line here. And I think it's going to happen. I think Colston Loveland will go. I know Tyler Warren was kind of a darling of the draft process. He's a very good player out of Penn State, but I think in terms of modern tight end, I think a lot of teams are drawn to what he'll bring to the table. Shoulder surgery after the 2024 season, which has kept him out of the pre-draft process, but he's expected to be full go, I believe, if not by minicamp, by the time these teams hit the field for OTAs, and it hasn't really affected his stock all that much. So
No.
Colston Loveland, potentially a top half of the first round pick.
And part of that is because he played through injury for much of the year, and I think teams appreciate that, right? He didn't shut it down when he could have, and this is a guy who, when he first got here, and we were hearing the chatter about spring ball or fall, whatever it was. I don't remember if he was an early enrollee or not, but when he first got here, somebody told me this guy is going to be a top 10 pick as a tight end. He's that good as a true freshman. So he might not be a top 10 pick, but holy cow, if he stayed another year, he might be, right? If he stayed another year at Michigan, but he is going to be a first round pick. And this guy, again, and I don't say this about every Wolverine. Everybody's like, oh, you're just saying this because you love the Michigan guys, so on and so forth. And I understand, for example, the consternation about Will Johnson and why he might slide to the second round. But I will say this, Colston Loveland to me is an obvious first round pick. And I don't think he makes it past number 20. I think this guy has everything you're looking for, like you said, in a modern tight end. He can play the wide receiver position in college, as he showed. He as really the number one receiver for this team last year, really the only receiver they had, if we're being honest. So excited for him too. Guess he's having a big party in Idaho, and we have to leave here pretty soon, AB, if we want to catch that flight.
Yeah, I'm gonna miss the flight. Sorry.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I have to. If the Pistons weren't playing, I'd be there, Colston. But
you going to the Pistons game tonight?
No.
That's
I'll be
a pricey
in the
ticket,
war,
brother.
It is.
Yeah.
I paid less to go to Tiger playoff games.
Yeah.
In fact, one of them was paid for by coworkers of mine. But it's I'm glad you brought that up in terms of the guys that, do you love football, or do these guys playing through stuff? There was a tweet from Jay Glazer this week. Megan's going to bring it up here in a sec. I'm going to read it verbatim. He said, NFL insider Jay Glazer says, interesting thing came up in my draft prep calls. For years, teams have pulled players off the board for A, injury concerns, or B, character concerns. A third category and reason has been added, and most teams I talked to had guys off their board for, quote, doesn't love football, unquote. This is the first year it was so prevalent. I asked around why that is, and the thought was because of NIL money. Guys have already been paid, and some feel like they don't need to grind to get paid. So the guys who love football are probably appreciated more. Just an interesting tidbit to pass along.
It's interesting.
I'm damn sure that that's part of the Los Angeles Chargers evaluation. I mean, I feel like we've heard the term "Do you love football?" for 10 years.
Yes.
And getting back to Colston, again, we could put any. I think the Chargers would be happy to take any of these guys. But if he's on the board at number 22, that almost feels like a slam dunk too, because we know Jim Harbaugh loves the tight end position, and they don't have enough weapons for Justin Herbert. So,
right.
In terms of guys to replace him, it'll be kind of by committee. It feels like Marlon Klein in the mix. We've heard good things about Hogan Hansen, Jalen Hoffman, spring game breakout performer. Maybe he earns a role, but there's no Colston Loveland in that room. But I think they got a couple pretty good ones in there.
Yeah, I agree, and I think Hogan Hansen's going to be a great one. In the mold of a Jeremy Tooman is how it was described to me by some people who were around back then in the late 1990s. It's crazy to think about that now, how long ago that was. It's starting to scare the shit out of me. But he is going to be a good one. And I was really happy for Jalen Hoffman. Here's a guy that his teammates talked about maybe being another Max Bredesen type, and then he goes out there and starts catching everything. He has great hands. His parents were in that room with us in that post-game locker room when we were interviewing him, and you could just sense that this young man seems to love football. And he said, I didn't surprise myself. Soft-spoken kid. I think he's going to play and play significantly. Marlon Klein is a guy who's still kind of learning the game, it seems like, and he's a great athlete. And there's something to be said for guys that have been playing the game their entire lives, right? And I think he loves the game. So to your tweet, or to Jay Glazer's tweet, I think that is something that helps him. But to me, I think Hogan Hansen will be the next great tight end here at Michigan.
Yeah, Marlon Klein kind of reminds me of. I don't know that he'll be as good as Luke Schoonmaker, but remember, we kept hearing about Scoonie, and then it was year 5 before he really kind of broke out. So
right,
it seems like he's a guy, and I think Grant Newsome made that comparison with him, so we'll see on him. There's one guy I want to talk about, and then we'll kind of go rapid fire with the last few. Josaiah Stewart is kind of the next closest guy. PFF has him at 76th on their board. You're probably looking at mid to late second round into the early third round. maybe even later into the third round. A little bit undersized. The edge class outside of Abdul Carter, it really kind of lacks a top end guy. There's a lot of guys in that next tier, that next cluster. And Stewart was about as productive as any of them. He had 33 total tackles last year, 8.5 sacks, 2 forced fumbles. He was extremely productive in his time at Coastal Carolina. He carried it over to Michigan. I think, if you want to do the pre-draft superlatives, I think that he's a guy that is most likely to outplay wherever he lands.
Yeah. Did you ever see him look like he was undersized when he was at Michigan, no matter who he was going against? That Alabama game, I will play that clip till the day I die. In fact, I might be buried with it, right? When he flat out takes a tackle and pushes him into the backfield to win that game in the Rose Bowl, one of the great moments in Michigan history. And he was the guy responsible for it. You want to talk about loving football. You can tell with this guy, and you can tell since the first day he got here. So I think he'll be a great second round pick for somebody. I'd take him on my team any day. You could talk about height and weight and everything else, but his strength is off the charts. He was setting edges as well as anybody by his last year, and was getting to the quarterback extremely well too. So we'll be keeping an eye on him. I don't think I don't think he'll sneak into the late first round or anything like that. But it wouldn't completely stun me if one of those teams that likes high character guys that are overachievers, took a flyer on him. But I will definitely be looking for him to go mid second round tomorrow.
Tough to say who the guy is that steps in for him, because
Mhm.
I think it's a lot of like the body types are just different in this year's
Yep.
room. He's more of kind of like a Sam linebacker. I think that's what he'll do at the next level. But
Yep.
yeah, like what Michigan has there, and Derek Moore and TJ Guy. We've talked about the defensive line ad nauseum at this point, so we'll blow past that.
Mhm.
I just want to kind of rapid fire these last few guys here.
Yep.
Moving into day 3, running back Kalel Mullings, PFF has him ranked 170th in the class. Talked to someone close to him recently. They feel pretty good about in the 4th, 5th, maybe 6th round range for him. Hasn't done a whole lot testing wise, just because he was banged up at the end of the year. Myles Hinton, PFF, has him at 214th, somewhere in that 6th or 7th round. And then the last ranked player, which I never would have thought this when he was brought in or when he was recruited or even a couple of years ago, but Donovan Edwards, PFF, has 329th, which is well out of the draft range. So you're looking at him as probably a 7th round pick or an undrafted free agent. Guys who were not ranked by Pro Football Focus, who were in Michigan's Pro Day: Amir Hall, Keyshawn Harris, Quentin Johnson, Makari Page, Josh Preeb, William Wagner, the long snapper, and Wesley Walker. So probably looking at all those guys plus Donovan as undrafted free agents, or, all it takes is one team. I don't think it's outside of the realm of possibility, but I guess just real quick thoughts on that group of guys, and I guess namely Mullings, who would be the next highest of those 3.
Yeah, what a position switch that was, right? And I think it was his dad who told Jim Harbaugh that, hey, my kid can play running back too. Where would they have been last year without him, Anthony? That's the crazy thing. That's the interesting thing to think about.
Somehow
So,
worse off offensively.
yes, exactly. And I love him. I love the fact that he loves football. That Ohio State game puts him into legendary status in terms of a single season, right? What he did against them, almost single handedly with a lot of his runs. With Donovan Edwards, I want this kid to succeed. I bet that Jim Harbaugh takes him in a heartbeat. Right, if he's there, maybe even in the 6th round, 7th round, I think that you would see Los Angeles take him. I think there is a role for him, more of a pass catching running back. I don't know that he has the vision to be an every down running back, and I know he probably doesn't want to hear it in some people, but it was pretty evident to me. I thought there are some limits to what he can do, but when you get him the football in open space, and when he can catch the ball. So I want to see this kid succeed. We'll be watching his career closely as well.
All right. So of the 4 guys that we think can go in the first round,
Yep.
plus Josaiah Stewart, Kalel Mullings, Myles Hinton, Donovan Edwards, I'm going to put you on the spot here. Do
Yep.
all of those guys get drafted?
Probably not. Right. There are going to be some, and it's better for them if they aren't. Some of these guys, like for example with Donovan, if you can pick your team where you've got a better opportunity to make the team as an undrafted free agent, then you almost hope that you don't get drafted in the 7th round, maybe by somebody who's taken a chance on you but is loaded at that position. So for some reason, I think he will get drafted, and As far as some of those other guys on the fence, they seem to be, to me, more undrafted free agent types. They've got some stuff to prove. So, but it'll be a nice showing again for Michigan, regardless. AB in the draft, we're getting used to that. It'll probably be the same next year. I don't know who it'll be. A lot of day 2 picks. We're hearing not a lot of day 1 picks, but a lot of day 2 picks. So, but let's let these guys play their last year at Michigan first.
Absolutely. Maybe some of those day 2 picks, throw some NIL at them, and they come back for
There you go.
the following season. Maybe they become day 1 picks. But I think that's going to do it for us today. NFL draft. I know there's not going to be a whole lot of runway on this before the first round is up, but that's 8 p.m. on Thursday, 7 p.m. Friday for the second and third rounds, and Saturday will be rounds 4 through 7. That's the marathon day. That's the day where, you know, there's going to be an alpaca at the San Diego Zoo that makes a pick for someone. And that'll run from probably about noon to 7 p.m. ESPN NFL Network will carry that. Michigan's going to keep that draft streak going. Going to have a couple first-round picks. There's going to be some cool data points that come out of this. So excited to cover it. We'll have it covered over at thewolverine.com. So, yeah, appreciate you guys for swinging by today. Use that promo code UM1 for 2 months of access to our site for $1. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel for more video content from the Wolverine, whether it's from the recruiting guys, us, or otherwise. For Chris Ballas and our producer, Megan, behind the scenes, I'm Anthony Broom. Thanks so much for watching. We'll talk to you again on Monday.